In the last video, we looked at total cost, and total cost can be broken down into fixed and variable cost. Why? Because we are looking at the short run. Now, businesses are interested in total cost and also average cost, and what they are trying to figure out, or what is important to them, is how much does it cost on an average to produce a unit of output. So in this video, what we'll look at is the concept of average cost. Here we have a familiar equation, and that is total cost can be broken down into labor and capital cost, or in other words, total cost is simply a sum of total variable and total fixed cost. Suppose I divide throughout by Q, TVC by Q, TC by Q, and TFC by Q. And what we get is essentially an average cost of production, average cost of producing 1 unit of output. So TC by Q, we call this ATC, or average total cost of production of 1 unit of output. TVC by Q is AVC, which is average variable cost of producing 1 unit of output. And then we have AFC, which is TFC divided by Q, and that is the average fixed cost per unit of output. So remember, average total cost is equal to the sum of average variable and average fixed cost. Now let us examine each of these average costs, and my favorite one, of course, or the easiest one, is the fixed cost. So once again, we have the first 3 columns in this table, which is something we have been using since we started working on the theory of business. And in the last video, we figured out if the firm pays a rent of $25, we treat rent as fixed cost, and so we have this number 25 all throughout, and you can see it does not change with output. It's total fixed cost. Now to figure out average fixed cost, what we do is we divide total fixed cost by output. So when the firm produces 5 units of output, total fixed cost is 25, or in other words, average fixed cost per unit of output is how much? 25 divided by 5, which is $5. Now the firm produces 12 units of output, and the total fixed cost is still 25. So 25 divided by 12 will give us 2.08, and in a similar way we can calculate average fixed cost. Here what we have done is we have average fixed cost as in dollars on the vertical axis, and of course Q, quantity of output, on the horizontal axis. We plot those points relating to average fixed cost. For example, when the firm produces 5 units of output, what is the average fixed cost? We calculated it is 25 divided by 5, which is $5. When the firm produces more, average fixed cost starts to decline, and this is what we see in terms of this curve. This curve is the AVC curve, and as we produce more and more, the total fixed cost gets spread over a larger and larger amounts of output, or in other words, the average fixed cost continuously declines as the firm increases output. Now let us look at the calculation of average variable cost. Once again, the first 3 columns are exactly the same that we have been using for quite some time. This is what we calculated as total variable cost. How did we calculate this? Each worker is paid $25. So when the firm hires no worker, TVC is 0. When the firm hires 1 worker, TVC is 25, and so on. And In this column what we have is AVC, or average variable cost, and we already know AVC is total variable cost divided by quantity of output. So when the firm produces 5 units of output, how much does it cost you? 25. So what is the average variable cost of producing 1 unit of output? It will be 25 divided by 5, and that gives us $5. When the firm produces 12 units of output, the total variable cost is 50, and so 50 divided by 12 will give us 4.17. And in a similar way, we can figure out average variable cost at different levels of output. What you should note here is, as the firm produces more and more output, initially average variable cost declines, and then you see as the firm produces more and more, what happens? Average variable cost of producing 1 unit of output starts to increase. And this is what we observe when we draw the AVC curve. We have AVC as in dollars on the vertical axis, Q on the horizontal axis. And what you find here is, as the firm starts to produce more and more, average variable cost starts to decline. It hits a minimum, and as the firm produces further, average variable cost starts to rise. Or in other words, the AVC curve is U-shaped. Initially it declines and then it starts to rise. Why does this happen? Think about it. We'll talk about this in some subsequent video. But you should try to figure out, why is AVC U-shaped? Here is a surprise. Let me answer this question as to why AVC is U-shaped. Now look at the following. We know AVC is what? It's TVC divided by Q, average variable cost of production. What is total variable cost? It's simply the cost of labor. And what is the cost of labor? It is wages times number of workers. Or what will be AVC? It will be W times L divided by Q. And now look at this expression, L by Q. Now from the previous videos on productivity, we defined average productivity and called it APL, and this is simply Q by L. So what is L by Q? It is simply 1 divided by average product of labor, or average variable cost can be expressed in this manner, and that is, it is wages divided by average productivity per worker. Or in other words, AVC and APL are inversely related to one another. What does this mean? As APL increases, AVC will fall. You should try this in terms of some numbers. And as APL falls, AVC will increase. And so you can see a link between productivity and average cost of production. So how can a firm bring down average cost of production? By simply increasing average productivity per worker. Or in other words, we believe the APL and the AVC curves are mirror images of one another. So this is why AVC curve is used. Now let us calculate average total cost of production, and there are two ways you can do it. Number one being, we know that average total cost of production is TC by Q, and you can calculate this. You have numbers relating to total cost and you have quantity of output. So when the firm produces 5 units of output, what is the total cost of production? It is 50. So what will be the average total cost of production? it will be 10. When the firm produces 12 units of output, what is the total cost of production? It is $75. You divide 75 by 12 and what you will get is 6.25. Another way to calculate average total cost is, we know ATC is a sum of AVC and AFC. And so what we do is we simply add up average variable cost to average fixed cost. So 5 plus 5 will give you 10. We get exactly the same answer. 4.17 plus 2.08 will give us 6.25. So there are two ways to calculate ATC, and you can use any one of the two. So here what I have done is I have plotted ATC using the numbers we had in the table, and this is given by this curve. This is the curve. You can see it is gray curve, and when the firm produces 5 units of output, how much is average total cost of production? It is $10. And we plot these points and we join them, and what we get is the ATC curve. On the same diagram, what I've done is I've also plotted the AVC curve, which is represented by this blue curve. And what you find are two things. Number one, pretty much like AVC, ATC also declines as we increase level of output. And as we increase more and more output, you can see an upward movement of both these curves. And so in a way, AVC and ATC are both U-shaped. Another thing you will observe is, look at the difference between ATC and AVC. This vertical distance, what will this be? This will be simply average fixed cost. How do we know that? It is just the difference between these two average cost. So the vertical distance is the average fixed cost, and what you observe here is average total cost and average variable cost come closer and closer as we increase the level of output. And why is this happening? Remember, AFC declines as we produce more and more output, and so the vertical distance between these two curves becomes smaller and smaller. And why is it happening? Simply because of average fixed cost, and we know that average fixed cost continuously declines. So ATC and AVC curves come closer and closer as we produce more and more output. Now this covers our discussion of average cost, and in the next video what we'll do is we'll look at marginal cost. Thank you for your time.